Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is the seventh video in a series with Natalie Menten and myself regarding the 2023 Colorado property tax situation. In the sixth part, Natalie provided background on Initiative 50 and the efforts to get it on the 2024 ballot. In this video, we will be talking about the Blue Book process for ballot measures and how you can have input. Natalie, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I'm really excited to learn more about the Blue Book process, what an impact it can have on Colorado voters. As far as I can remember, when I first turned 18, you get this in the mail. It makes you feel that it's fall, that it's election time, changes in the air. And it's really a great opportunity to understand what's on your ballot, a great resource for voters all across Colorado, but also a great resource for liberty activists and people who want to have input and kind of tell the real side of the story, the liberty side of the story that these politicians often neglect.
That's exactly right. It's not just a booklet that's created wholly by the government, sent to us. There's a citizen engagement part of it. And as we've talked about, that's what we're really trying to drive with this video series is activists being able to engage at this local and the state level. And there's also materials that instead of just being a battle against this issue, one or another, there's some general tools that are available for activists. And the Blue Book is one of these that potentially could be something you engage in each and every year, maybe every other year, because the Blue Book covers statewide issues. And it'll include regular issues such as non-financial related. So you can think back to a variety of different ballot issues that would pertain to everything from wildlife to maybe utilities, but also TABOR issues, tax related issues. And that's especially where we're going to focus with this. There's this booklet that actually TABOR ties into this a little bit. It's a little bit of history and a tidbit. The Taxpayers Bill of Rights, or TABOR, before TABOR, the Blue Book existed. But the difference was when the Blue Book, which I show quick handout, many people we had it on that front cover, but the thick booklet that we get now, before TABOR, the booklet was only distributed in some public facilities, and the requirement was that it be printed in the newspaper, one major newspaper in each county. But thanks to the Taxpayers Bill of Rights, or TABOR, the booklet is now mailed to every household where there's a registered voter. And so let's say there's 3 registered voters. They're going to get one booklet. So it's really important to note that this booklet comes in a couple weeks, roughly 2 to 3 weeks before the ballot is actually received. It's a good note to have everybody set that booklet aside and not let it get buried and forgotten where it is, because you're really going to need it when the ballot comes within a couple weeks. But thanks to TABOR, again, the Blue Book has been now mailed to voters in the last 30 years. And it's important to note that because there's people who say we should get rid of TABOR, but they don't realize there's actually a lot of pieces of TABOR that are very pro-citizen, the Blue Book being one of them. TABOR also allowed voters to participate more directly in the pro and the con statements, actually creating the pro and the con statements that are in the Blue Book, instead of government staff members. That freedom, unfortunately, was eliminated in 1994, just 2 years after TABOR was passed. It was a legislative referred measure. So you could wonder there what was going on when the politicians wanted to reduce citizen direct input into being able to educate about these important matters like constitutional amendments. So I bring that part up. The Blue Book has many sections, and we're going to cover that in some more detail later. But the reason I included this slide is because there's a lot of voters I've run into over many years who say, who creates this question? Who wrote this? I can't understand what this says. So that's part of the purpose of this video, is to explain what the Blue Book is, who composes what parts of ballot issues. So we're talking about who creates the ballot questions and who crafts the Blue Book. because that's really two different things that you're getting in the mail. Well, the ballot measures and the questions that are referred by the legislature, which is also known as the politicians, those ballot measures, the questions themselves are written by the bill sponsors. Citizen-initiated ballot measures are written by the initiative's proponents. But the actual question that gets framed, which is what is on, let's say you're running in to vote at the last minute, you look at your ballot, there's just a question there, it doesn't have all of this information in the blue book. For citizen-initiated measures, there's actually 3 state lawyers called they're appointed to the title board, and it's actually more than 3, but 3 will be on the panel at one time. They're the ones that create the ballot questions. Now, it's a little bit of background because what we're really talking about here is the blue book. The blue book itself is now, since that repeal in 1994, really composed by and written by the Colorado Legislative Legal Services. But the public can chime in and be part of the process. And why is that important? Because of some of these questions that get crafted, especially the ones referred by the politicians, that may not be as transparent and as clear as you would like with a ballot question. The blue book is what's supposed to be able to be able to decipher what's in that measure. What's the impact to you both financially? What's the tax increase? All these things. Also the pro and con statements. So their blue book is written by Legislative Legal Services, and there's of course a period of time where there's 3 drafts. Through those 3 drafts, the public can chime in, and then there's finally a public hearing. So really you have 4 opportunities, but it tends to take a supermajority vote during that legislative hearing, the final step, to be able to change anything that came from the 3rd draft. So really the ideal times to chime in is draft 1, 2, and 3. Now the blue book content, as we're going to go into more detail a little bit later on, is supposed to provide an analysis of the ballot pretty much from bumper to bumper, let's call it, all the way from the financial aspects to the language to those pro and con statements. And as noted before, any person can file written comments with legislative legal staff during the preparation of this analysis. Now, getting on the public comments, it's a year-to-year process. I signed up years ago to get on this list, and I actually don't have to sign up fresh each time, like search it out and sign up fresh. They keep the email list from those who have been interested over the years in Blue Book comments, submitting comments, and they'll generate an email that says, okay, here's a proposition or amendment that's going to be on the ballot. Do you want to receive notices about this specific measure? Some years that might be one measure that I'm interested in. Maybe there's only one on the ballot, but some years that might mean there's 3, 4, 5, 6 measures between the legislative referred ones. So the public getting on that mailing list is easy enough. I've listed the phone number here, 303-866-3521, or a legislative legal services email address where you can just subscribe pretty much at any point in that time of the drafting process or any other point in the year. Because this whole process starts really in the spring, goes through fall, the election, really to be involved with it. But getting involved, getting on that list is a good way to ensure that the language is both clear and that it's transparent, and to overcome any deceptive language that the politicians may have referred to the voters. It starts with signing up at the Colorado General Assembly. So while some people might think you go to the Secretary of State's office, this ballot analysis really is run through the Colorado General Assembly. I've highlighted the link. You're going really up to the main menu bar, looking under initiatives. You'll see some options, but it goes to the ballot analysis is the part where you get to chime in with comments. If you go into that page, you're going to be able to find where there's a link to actually subscribe. So if you didn't want to reference back to the phone number I just repeated or stated, or the email address, there's a link that makes it very easy. When you do, I think you're going to go through maybe a little bit of this a little bit later and show a couple of those options that exist. So if you're in a couple, you like some data more about what goes on at the Capitol, there's a couple other subscriptions there also. And the timeline for these drafts, again, this is pretty much a year-to-year thing. So it's just good to keep in mind there's certain points after the legislature is done, there are certain key dates. And a lot of these can be found on a election calendar the Secretary of State produces. But for the drafting process for the Blue Book, draft 1 is in June, draft 2 in July, draft 3 in August, and the hearing will typically be mid to late August, if maybe September, depending on the year. There's the drafts from all of those stages are available. When you do that walkthrough, I think you can go to those and go into a little more detail. I think you're going to show the history on where people can start to look up some other things related to this. Then there's some people who may say, like I talked to somebody today that I'm trying to encourage to chime in on draft 3. And even though he is a lawyer, he said, you know, it just takes me a while to go through these different things and to really lay it out. And I said, well, even if you're a lawyer or not, because there are most people that chime in on this process are not lawyers, is the basic thought is the Blue Book is supposed to be about 8th grade reading level. That's the rule of thumb they use over in the title process when they're framing the question you actually read on the ballot. And with that, it's not supposed to be complicated. It's not supposed to be legalese. There is the text of the measure, but the Blue Book itself is supposed to be able to convey to the average voter the impact of what it's going to do to your pocketbook, the pros and cons, whether you're taking their government's asking to take on debt, all these variety of different things that can be either put into statute or put into our state constitution. And there's different philosophies on how to best convey messages during the drafting process itself. I'm going to give a couple examples here. These are actually happen to be from books this year. So in one case, on that upper little call out section there, somebody is just referring to a page number and the lines. All of these legislative type documents are generally numbered, and so it makes it easy to reference page 3, line 21. And then in this case, that was the way that the person submitting this comment chose to do that, and didn't go into a tremendous amount of detail, just basically saying the opening paragraph is not precise. It could mislead voters. And instead of necessarily lowering property taxes, it should include a more explicit or clear explanation. The two other callouts here are actually strike-throughs, where to make it more visibly clear, because there's pages and pages of these proposals, to make it more clear in this case, and these are ones that I submitted, so you can see try to use legislative grammar style, that adding something new is in all capital letters, and a complete strike through is pretty obvious. And in this case, with these examples, I'm not really arguing any points. My main goal in submitting Blue Book comments here is an example. You can see there, they are suggesting to title it Reduce Property Taxes and Retain State Revenue. That is not nearly clear enough for a voter. So my capitalized suggestion there is that the title, which is, as we all know, some people just read the beginnings or the beginning paragraph of especially long documents and maybe scan through to maybe like the last paragraph. So what it states at the very beginning is really important. So I've got a suggestion of state retention of tax, it's a mouthful, state retention of taxpayers' Bill of Rights, TABOR refunds, and reduced property tax assessments. Because in this case, there really is fuzzy math on reducing property taxes. Depends what class you are, all of these different things, and as to how much that would actually reduce. It's actually not the main mission of Proposition HH. And again, we're talking a year-to-year process, but this is a consistent theme that they like to refer to TABOR as surplus or something like retained state revenue. And why? Because they consider the Taxpayers Bill of Rights, that full term, to be something that will create emotion within a voter. Some may call that a trigger word. Well, I'm sorry, but it's actually titled the Taxpayers Bill of Rights. And if that actually motivates people to become a little bit hot under the collar or a little concerned when a ballot issue is affecting their Taxpayers Bill of Rights, then it should be laid out. It shouldn't be just retained state revenue. I mean, like the ballot question in this case, because it's a legislative referred matter, the state legislature in this case, and again, these, I'm using one example from 1 year, but this is a consistent theme, consistent. They're trying to say to the voters, can we have all of these goodies? And, oh, by the way, we're going to keep the surplus. Well, the average voter may not understand what a surplus is. But what that means is our Taxpayers Bill of Rights that we are expecting, which now is supposed to be in the upcoming year, $3 billion. And they're trying to keep the money. So it's very important that, I did it on first draft, doing it on second draft, that the Taxpayers Bill of Rights is spelled out. That's a consistent thing that even if, again, you're not a lawyer, you as an activist can be just chiming in. It would be great if we had, year after year, 50 people who just main mission was, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to make sure that TABOR is spelled out in its full term in all the parts of the Blue Book as possible. So I could go on, and I don't want to go on more than that, but you can see that I'm not trying to really throw a lot of like, we look at an LA Law and all these different shows, I guess, I don't know, whatever is the law shows now, but they've got all these criminal theories and everything. I mean, not criminal, legal theories and all these different things. But just a simple goal of mine is to make it as clear as possible. You're losing your TABOR refunds, and that needs to be laid out in the Blue Book. So bright and shiny and everything else, and standing out at you. The average voter will get it when they are rushing in to vote at 6:45 on election night. So when you're submitting Blue Book comments, and I use this a lot, I will keep, this is why I actually have a big file folder in my old paper files with lots of copies of old Blue Books and actually gray books, which we'll talk about in another episode. Because sometimes you're looking for just what is that best phrasing, how to best describe this complicated thing. And you're going to go to show people a little more of this, but I thought it was interesting just to show a screenshot of, you can go back to old copies of Blue Books, 1954. And you can show the link because I forgot to put the link in there. But that's really an important part of history. Ballot issues, not every state has citizen-driven initiatives, where we want to protect that at all cost. We actually want to take back some of our rights, but it's about getting stuff on the ballots. It's about providing the information, and the Blue Book is a tool for activists to get engaged in. And it's just something that once you start to do it, it becomes easier and easier, and you don't worry about stressing out over language. You're just chiming in. And if there's enough people chiming in with simple little messages, we will actually change these things. We will make this book even more clear to the voters about what is the financial impact and what's being taken from them, whether it's rights or money.
Wow.
I
Well,
think
Natalie,
that was my last
yeah, that was
slide.
An amazing presentation, Natalie. I really appreciate your knowledge and your expertise, sharing it with all of us out here in Colorado, giving us the opportunity to fight back, to have our voices heard, and present a different side of the story. I don't think it's any surprise to people that when you allow politicians to write the blue book or write anything, it's no surprise when it turns out to be propaganda, right? So it's great that we have the Taxpayer Bill of Rights that allows this citizen input process where individuals can get involved, have their voices heard, and and speak out. So I think it's very important for the Liberty community here in Colorado to make the Blue Book an important part of the yearly process, to plan ahead, to be ready, and to act on it. Get involved in all three drafts and pay attention and become an active voice.
It is. And, we were talking during another point, you and I, about just curiosity, how many households get that? And, I was unable to locate an exact number on a quick search on the amount of households, but we know that we've got now, over three, well, they definitely between 2 to 3 million voters, adult voters. So there's just, as activists, how many of us can afford to share a message directly to the doorstep? Even better, it's to the mailbox, which you and I can't get into, and the mailman can, and put a message within that box for all of these voters that are out there. Well, this is the tool. And TABOR actually gave us more tools. And it's unfortunate that just 2 years after TABOR was passed, the politicians persuaded voters to give away their rights. But that is why we want to get engaged in the Blue Book, right? We want to make people more aware of what are these impacts, and a quick decision could come back to haunt you a lot later.
100%. It'd be interesting to see what the Blue Book for 1994 said about that measure. I'm curious now. But
I pulled it up earlier.
but definitely a point of impact, a point of interest for people in the Liberty community, people who want to have a voice. The Blue Book is a perfect tool for that. So thank you so much, Natalie. Really appreciate all your work here. And we have more to come. All these videos can be found at freestatecolorado.com. Great resource for everybody out there, whether you're a candidate running for office, somebody who wants to be vocal in your community, or just understand how Colorado's political system works.
Yes, use all the tools we can, and appreciate being able to share the information.
All right, Natalie, thank you and take care.